The Other Side of Fear, a Backpacker's Memoir by Jenni. Unhidden Heroines Series, Book Number 1, Chapter 8, Intervention, Rehab, and Alex. A few months later, I was in my bed, sick, coming down from a bender that lasted more days than I could remember, when Lisa stepped into my room. She sat down on my mattress. I still slept on the floor, but I didn't look at her. "You're sick," she said. "Jenni, I can't watch another person die from drugs and alcohol. Make a choice. Choose change, and I'll be with you on the journey. Choose change, or I leave." I had already gotten fired from my job for showing up late, showing up drunk or high, and I was never capable of fulfilling my work duties because I was so tired. For months, I just had endless, meaningless sex and lived strung out on drugs. Choosing between life and death at this point seemed too big for me, for the power inside me. All I felt was empty, so far away from any kind of reality. Being sober and present was unbearably painful, but to stay checked out had grave consequences. What I wanted was to be high and fade away little by little, eventually just becoming dust the wind could carry away to some new faraway place. New land, new adventure. How had I even gotten to that rock bottom? She was waiting for an answer. Did I want her to call my mom? Did I need help making a choice? Was I willing to go to rehab? I hadn't spoken to my mother in a year, and I couldn't afford rehab. I took a few days to think about what I wanted to do. Staying in my dealer's dingy apartment, chain-smoking menthols, getting fucked up and getting fucked. People came in and out, buying their dope, some staying to smoke, snort, shoot, or swallow, and then they left. What if I just let go of everything and stayed here? Could I turn tricks and do drugs all fucking day long every day? If I stayed numb, I wouldn't feel it anyway. What's the point of keeping a job anyway, to pay bills? Nah, I couldn't anymore. I couldn't care. Humans are the only species who have to pay to live, and I wanted more out of life than to chase a degree plan for a phantom job opportunity. Who knew if the phantom job opportunity could pay for bills and give me a better quality of life anyway? Nothing about being a hamster on a wheel seemed like a better quality of life to me. When I didn't come home for a few days, Lisa called my mom without waiting for my answer. I felt like it was a huge betrayal at the time, but later I was able to understand that it was an act of love. She saved my life. When she talked to my mom, she spilled the beans about everything. Of course, my mom had been wondering for months where I was living and what I was doing. My mom, in turn, called my dad. That's when I got a voicemail from my dad reminding me that his name was on the title of my car, and since I was involved in nefarious behavior, that could reflect on him poorly. He was coming to take my car. It turns out my mom reached out to my dad for financial help getting me into a rehab program. When he told her he was done trying to help me and turned her away, she then reached out to some of her family members who had resources to help me. She got me checked into a 30-day program at a place called Valley Hope in the middle of nowhere about an hour north of Oklahoma City. To say rehab was an intense experience is putting it mildly. I was already numb and dead on the inside, but I had always been the tower of power for everyone in my life, including for my mom my entire childhood. To be in her passenger seat, sick as fuck, being hauled to rehab, was beyond surreal. The landscapes whizzed by, and I had no will to live, really. I knew I was at a crossroads, but didn't really have the strength to choose a path, nor did I care. After check-in, I surveyed my room. The nightstand held brochures about addiction with the name of the place printed all over them. Valley Hope, it read. Hope my ass. While I might not have known it at the time, I learned more about drugs and addiction while being inside Valley Hope's walls than I did outside of them. I hated it, but at that point, I hated everyone and everything, mostly myself. During my first 24 hours there, I became one with my bunk and refused to leave it. I slept and wrote and ignored any sign of life around me. I hated food. I hated eating. I hated people talking and the sun shining through my window. I loathed their advice about where to go and how to live my life like they knew anything about me. Just let me do my own thing. Just let me do things my own way, fuckheads. I knew that my own way was killing me, though, and I knew I needed an intervention, and I hated that, too. After 24 hours of hiding under my covers, my assigned counselor knocked on my door. She informed me that there would be a group therapy session every day and 3 meals per day, and thus far it seemed like I was blowing off both. If I continued to do so, I wouldn't meet the expectations required to check out for my program after 30 days. Surprise! I hated her too. I tried the group counseling, even tried to speak when it was my turn. I turned around and realized it had been a year since that awful week in July when my life shattered into a million pieces. My life consisted of being strung out on drugs, and there I was in a figurative train wreck of a rehab full of rednecks with meth mouth. How the fuck did I get here? How do I get out? How was I supposed to talk about what I had gone through with these people? When it was my turn to share, I had a full-fledged panic attack and ran. After that, I sat quietly in group sessions so the lady in the corner with her glasses, perched on her pinched nose and stained blouse, could check this box off her list. I went to the cafeteria and pushed food around on my plate long enough for my babysitters to check their box that I had eaten. When people at my table got up to go outside for some post-meal smokes, I went with them. I was still quiet, even upon being beckoned for a conversation from the group. I ignored the cues from others and stared at the ground. I just wanted to smoke with them and listen to their crazy-ass stories. The 2 girls who were there for meth addiction went down to the fence line to smoke dope. One of the 2 was already dead, though. I could see it in her eyes. It was only a matter of time before her physical body gave out. She looked terrible, and I couldn't stop staring. Her yellow skin, teeth rotting out of her head, eyes sunken in. She was here because of a court order to attend rehab. The second girl was addicted to ketamine. She looked just as bad as the meth girl, with big purple track marks up and down her arms, feet, and neck. Death had taken her too, but it looked different. She was only 25 and already looked so old, like she was rotting from the inside out. I wondered what kind of wounds she was hiding that allowed death to take her at such a young age. I knew what some of mine were and how they hurt. Hers had to be worse. Another patient shared about her opiate addiction, which started with a sports injury and a prescription for Lortabs. At her lowest point, she sent her son to play with his friends, with instructions to raid the medicine cabinets in their homes for painkillers. I chain-smoked my menthols and listened to them brag about their crazy drug stories when I realized that someone was violently vomiting in the background during our entire conversation. I started to ask what that was about, but was spared the act of opening my mouth when someone mentioned the new intake coming down off heroin. Fuck. I had never been around heroin or anyone on it. I had only seen that in movies. One thing I was certain of, I had never heard someone so fucking sick in my life. What could make someone so sick? I realized that was what Lisa saw in me, too, and why she was so scared. Death was creeping in. To me, that's why I felt only cold and hard on the inside. I had been numbing everything so that I wouldn't feel myself get eaten alive. The next morning, while playing with my eggs, I noticed this beautiful creature sitting at the end of my table. His shiny, curly hair cascaded down around his face while he faced a sketch pad on the table. Did he want to have breakfast with me? No. He was the person who had been so sick coming down off heroin. We instantly connected and spent the next 3 days without leaving each other's company. In spite of his outer beauty, there was no sexual attraction between us. Our connection was purely an emotional and spiritual thing. We were supposed to cross paths. He was 28, only 3 classes short of finishing his degree in music. He played both the guitar and piano, and his voice was the voice of an angel. He had spent a college semester in Spain, so we only spoke in Spanish, something that made us both so happy. I imagined how beautiful it would be to meet someone like him while exploring the streets of Spain. What had opened the chasm between the beautiful life that he lived and the life he was living right now? It wasn't long before I found out. In a car accident 2 years before we met, his pregnant fiancée, had died. The same accident left him with chronic back pain and deep emotional pain. He used the prescription pills for his back pain to treat both, but that eventually converted to an addiction to heroin. I loved staring at his curls. They were glossy and caught the light just right when he pulled them back in a ponytail. He shared memories of his fiancée, how she was his first love, pregnant with his first child, and even the huge argument they had the night of the car accident. The pain was his motivation to stay numb. Of course, he wanted to hear my story, but I was usually just quiet. I liked listening because then my mind wasn't on my own. I hated being sober. It hurt. Also, I was very leery to let him in on my secrets. I was sure he wouldn't like me. I hated me, and surely if he knew what was inside of me, he would see all the same reasons to hate me as well. It was my 5th day in rehab, and we were laying in the grass looking at the stars, which filled the Oklahoma summer sky. "I will never quit heroin," he said matter-of-factly while clearing his throat. He sighed and looked over at me. His quiet, determined statement ricocheted off every blade of grass around my head. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. Huh? "I'm only here because I ran out of money for dope. Here they give me pills to help the chemical come down. There's no way to come down without help." He said these words as he studied my face, searching for feedback or a response. I gave him none on the outside, although the thoughts were a whirlwind inside my own head. "So then what?" I persisted. "Are you going to be 50 doing the same dumbass shit?" "Nope," he quietly responded. "I will either be dead or in prison by then. Those are my only 2 options. Quitting isn't one of them, because I can't imagine my life without heroin. I would rather die." Oh, I remained quiet, letting those powerful words resonate. "Have you ever seen anyone shoot up?" I shook my head. "A friend came to see me earlier and brought me some dope. Do you want to watch me shoot up, Jenni?" Something intrigued me about seeing him do it. I couldn't imagine being desperate enough to stick a needle in my arm. "Sure," I responded under my breath. He hopped up and gave me a hand to pull me up. At Valley Hope, men and women stayed in separate bunks, so we hiked together towards his dorm. "Jenni, my family hates me. I've stolen everything I can from anyone I can to get dope. My parents just paid this bill, desperate for any attempt to save me. They think someday I will quit, that someday they will save me. My love for heroin is far greater than any pain I cause to anyone else. It is a monster that has overtaken me, Jenni. I hate myself for how much pain I have caused people, but doing it numbs it all." I lit up a menthol for us to share and listened to our shoes crunch the grass. I knew I shouldn't be there. Getting caught in a boys' dorm would put a mark on my chart, and I already had so many from skipping meals and group activities. He snuck me in a back way and calmly told me that he knew his roommate was at dinner, and then he would be visiting him with a family member, so we had at least an hour. I wondered if his roommate's visitor was also bringing him a fix like Alex's friend had done earlier. Once inside the room, he pulled me into a bathroom and shut the door. He used a little tool from his pocket to unscrew the towel rod next to the sink. His setup was hiding inside a syringe and heroin. He pulled a shoelace from his shoe and took a spoon out of the coffee mug next to the sink. I wondered if he had strategically placed that mug and spoon there hours before in anticipation of the secret moment. "I've already lost everything that was once important to me in my life," he explained while preparing his rig. I watched him mix heroin and water in the spoon and ready it in the syringe, thumping out excess oxygen. "You've never reached this point. You aren't like me. It's not too late for you. You still have a way out. You weren't meant for this. You can still save yourself." He sat down on the toilet and showed me where to tie the shoelace on his arm. He found the perfect vein and shot up. I felt heaviness hit me like a weighted bodysuit. It pressed down on my chest and clenched my throat. His eyes rolled back into his head as he slumped against the back of the toilet, his head thumping against the wall. Had he overdosed? I didn't think so. I backed out of the bathroom slowly, taking in the horror of the scene that had occurred directly in front of my eyes. I sat on the bed and watched him twitch. He never meant to be here, and it happened one decision at a time, one lie at a time. And death was taking him a little more each time. The room was full of death and darkness in that moment. The movie Final Destination came to mind, thinking about when death would creep in and kill people in random ways. How many lies was I away from being at that point? He didn't think it was too late for me, but was it? If I really wanted my life to end, did I want to do it like that or in a quicker way? I realized in that moment I didn't want either. I watched Alex and realized it was time to fight for my life. I texted Randy immediately, "Can you please come pick me up? Valley Hope and Cushing, overnight, disappear." He responded, "Be there at 3 a.m. I snuck back into my dorm and was grateful to find my roommate was gone completely. She must have checked out, I thought to myself. I showered, packed my suitcase, and made my bed up exactly how it was when I found it the first day I arrived. At 2:30 a.m., I snuck out the back of the building with my bag on my back and hid in a grove of trees that surrounded the first entrance to the property. When I saw Randy's headlights, I motioned for him to stop, ran, threw my bags in the back of the truck, and disappeared into the starry summer night. I had thought about Alex through the years. We stayed in touch for about a year. When I bailed rehab, I left him a note with my cell number, and then I heard he was staying on his dealer's couch, serving as a drug meal in exchange for drugs. When we talked on the phone, he would tell me how many guns he had been shoved in his face, that he had been forced to commit murder for his dealer, about all the close calls he'd had with the police. One day, he stopped answering his calls. I am not sure whether he died or was finally imprisoned, and I will probably never know. But I carry the lesson he gave to me in my heart always. His stories would save my life years later when I would face addiction again, alone in a foreign country.